This presentation is delivered by the Stanford Center for Professional Development.
Welcome to Engineering and Climate Change. This is a very special week. We've got a guest lecturer, Doug Stoup, with us, who you will find amazing. Again, the purpose of the class is trying to give you the tools to go out there and make a difference. And here is a graphic of what we're covering this quarter. So where are we? So we've covered a number of really important lectures about how, well, an introduction to, yes, there is climate change and what's the status there, and a nice video visit from Terry Root, Professor Terry Root. Then we've had Rex telling us about how on earth do you find, fund, and foster the most promising ideas in clean tech. Kimberly Weefling helped us figure out how to tackle impossible problems and find out maybe they're just really hard. For some reason, I want to double check my mic. Yep. Don Foldenauer told us a real insider's view about the solar industry and some of the issues that we're running into with that. Doug will give us a wonderful lecture and slideshow and who knows what, but a lot of inspiration about firsthand observations of climate change in polar regions. You will find this exciting. Professor Will Chue is coming next week to talk about energy storage techniques, electrochemistry and energy storage. I think this is a really remarkably important thing when you're looking at alternative energy. And I put in sort of blue, darker blue, this last lecture when I'll be talking again. I could tell I sowed a little bit of confusion by having the soft geoengineering paper on the coursework site for you, thinking, so is Doug talking about geoengineering? No, what I wanted to do was to let you know kind of early on, and this was the right time, why do I think ice is so darned important to what's happening in climate change? And Doug knows. Doug has been there more than anyone else, I think. So so all your geoengineering questions that you submitted, I'm probably the right one to be answering those in that lecture or along the way in the rest of the quarter. Next week we've got Professor Will Chue. He's in material science and engineering, and they look at efficient electrochemical routes for getting solar energy to chemical fuels, which is really pretty interesting. He's one of Technology Review's top 35 under 35, so really quite an innovator. And to celebrate that, I'll show you the readings in another slide. Let's just go to that right now. Go to the GCEP site, and I will be posting these slides later this afternoon to our site in the materials section. So you'll be able to see these links of how you can read at least one paper on advanced materials and catalysts. I actually was meeting with Professor Tom Jaramillo this morning, who is another one of the chemical engineering professors looking at electrochemical routes to energy storage. Really exciting stuff. And watch the GCEP site if you have time. I won't even try to pronounce his name. It's not the way it's spelled. But the video on battery storage 101, this is one of the real rising stars as well. And then you will have heard, in a way, from all three of the top energy storage guys here at Stanford, as far as I can tell. Jaramillo's work is here in the advanced materials and catalysts thing. We've got Will Chue coming in person. And then there's this beautiful video from the GCEP site. So please use the coursework site for your homework. Please, we've decided to start the lecture somewhere between 12:50 and 12:55. So do try to get here at 12:50 if you can. If you've missed any first minutes, go ahead and look at the lecture on the SCPD site later, and you can catch those first couple minutes again. There was a glitch. Please don't stress. I've had enough stress for all of us over this. There's something about the way I have interacted with the coursework site in which a couple of your listings of questions for past lecturers have been clobbered, and I've talked to the people who run that site. There's no way to recover. There's no backup. Fortunately, I got all that captured. Fortunately, also, I believe if I err, you don't pay. So everybody gets marked off for those 2 weeks where those have disappeared. One heads-up student wrote to me last night or this morning saying, well, it's saying I didn't. Don't worry. And I'm now keeping a second backup of everything on my own. There's something dreadful that happened there. So I've got a backup too. So that's the dark side of coursework. But when it's working well, it's so much easier for me. So please submit your assignments there. If you're having trouble with the assignment, finding it, it's under the assignments tab. And so materials is where you're finding all our readings and such. And unless I'm referring you to external links like the GSEP, but the assignments, go in the assignments tab and then look for the title of that question, and then you should be able to just get in there and fill your stuff out. And if that doesn't work, just email me, but it's easier for me if most of you are using the courseworks. You can see how to get the videos of the class, and meeting before lunch, meeting before class over lunch works for me. We're doing it in Packard at Bytes. It's a little bit easier than here in Wang. The homework, so summarize the lecture, do some reading for the next lecture, email me at least one burning question. Those are the homework. Again, there's some optional things we can talk about, optional readings listed here. Somebody has already suggested a lecturer, which I really love, thank you, and some readings, please do. We'll talk more about that next week. We want to make room for Doug as soon as we can. This is review information and opportunities at Stanford nearby to learn more about climate change and what's going on around here. I wanted to say just a couple words about the ice albedo feedback effect. So this comes from my own ICE 911 that you've gotten now your thrilling preview of from reading that paper. Basically, polar ice melt is in positive feedback, and a positive feedback loop generally gets engineers' attention, right? So the more the ice melts, the more areas exposed that will absorb radiation really well, which is open ocean, instead of having areas that have what's called a high albedo where it gets to reflect most of the incoming radiation. And so it accelerates. And 10% of the world's ocean area is in the Arctic and the Antarctic. So that's a big deal. And it's a big lever on climate change. There are many effects that stem from this. And climate experts estimate that this one effect is increasing global warming by 20% just itself. So it's a huge thing. And I won't be getting to my solution here right now of what I've been working on, trying to see if that's a backup option. But if all else fails, you do find people contemplating various geoengineering options over time. This chart is really interesting, and it's from the 2,000 or so scientists in the IPCC, the subgroup that looked at ice melt. I think I've alluded to this before, but this is quite a remarkable slide. This shows the change in slope really well. These were the consensus of the IPCC, a huge error range of what the predictions were, red being kind of what's the middle ground here. But in 2007, far worse than that. That's when we began to really fall off the cliff, and it's even worse this year. It's making a lot of news. And if you talk to long-term ice experts who study this, they will tell you the slope is changing over time, and we're getting to see that. So that's a big deal. It affects Antarctica, it affects the Arctic, although in different ways, and it affects the Greenland, it affects the glaciers. So it's a big deal with a lot of ramifications, and that's why I promote books like this if you want to learn more about ice. Peter Wadham's Ice in the Ocean. So on to this week's lecturer who knows a lot about ice. Doug, I'm not even sure what all I can say except that you are an extraordinary person doing extraordinary things. And Doug has as one of his real passions is educating people, sharing with them what he knows. So Arctic and Antarctic explorer, environmentalist, first-hand observer, placing experiments for scientists. As he mentioned before, he gets standing ovations when he brings back the observations from these really difficult places. And it's best to let Doug tell the rest of the story. So thank you, Doug.
All right. Just move this over.
Thanks. Yeah, I'll just take her away. Oh, that was mine.
Yep. So first of all, thank you, Leslie Fields, Dr. Fields, for having me come, and thank you for having me here. I know that some of you have sent some questions, and I will hopefully answer those during my lecture. And I appreciate all the questions have been great. I really appreciate you taking the time to send me the questions. I didn't answer them directly, but hopefully I'll answer them during my lecture. If not, please ask me when we're done, and I'll try to answer them the best I know how. Thank you, Satish and his students for coming and joining, and Mike and Chelsea and for coming as well. Like Leslie said, I am a polar adventurer. I don't like to put myself in the same category as the turn of the century explorers. I have a sat phone and modern technology and a GPS and all the things that that allow me to go travel to these environments and travel safely. Those guys 100 years ago did it with a sextant and a reindeer sleeping bag, and once they got there, they had to turn around and go back. So I call myself a modern day adventurer. I've been all over the world as I'm seeing the planet. It's amazing, from Spitsbergen to Greenland to the North and South Pole to the Himalaya. I live up in Tahoe. Skiing is a big part of my life. I ski almost every day. I'd be skiing right now if I was up there now. I think they got about 3 feet of snow. So anyway, it's a big part of my life. I've skied Antarctica. I run trips down there on big cruise ships as well as sailboats. I'm still a dreamer. I still want to actually do a trip across Antarctica where I'm going to sail from Ushuaia all the way to the Antarctic continent. I want to use kites and kite sail all the way across the continent and then sail all the way to New Zealand over 4,000 miles. And what I want to do is I want to do it without any use of any stove. I want to do a zero carbon footprint expedition. I want to use solar panels to melt my snow, use wind power to propel myself with a sailboat and with kites to be able to go across Antarctica, and be able to do it with manpower too. So if I can do it in one of the most inhospitable places on the planet, you can certainly do it at home. I was a snowboarder at one time. You can see, this is, anybody ever see Paramount Pictures? It's their logo. It's a place called Artes in Arahu. It's in Peru, and it's a beautiful peak. I ended up doing the first snowboard descent of that mountain, and you can see I got a rope attached to me. My left hand is an ice axe. I use that as a tool, and that's the name of my company, Ice Axe. And we use it not only to climb up, but also to descend. If I slipped and fell, lost an edge with my snowboard, I'm able to self-arrest, hopefully in a 50-degree slope. Actually, that rope is attached to another skier, and then I'll ski the length of the rope and that's set an anchor, and then he'll ski down. But that was a 7,000-foot face that we were able to snowboard down. And skiing in Spitsbergen, finding great snow and going places. I sort of like the sun, so I go places where there's 24 hours of sun quite a bit. I climbed the 6th highest peak in the world called Choi Yu. And this place is truly amazing. It's an 8,000 meter peak. There's 14 8,000 meter peaks in the Himalaya. And this was one of them. And I did the first snowboard descent off this mountain. Amazing to be able to go there and be able to see the indigenous tribes and be able to interact with the people. I've also done a couple other humanitarian efforts in the Khumbu Icefall, which is also Nepal. I did with Dr. Bowers and another Indian doctor. We were able to go to the Khumbu Icefall and actually do Himalayan cataract project, where we did 2,000. I just sort of prepped the patients, but he was able to actually do cataract surgery on 2,000 people in 2 weeks. We were doing 200 operations a day, which I'm pretty proud of that. You know, this is something that a lot of fun for me to go and do and be able to be a part of. And these people hadn't seen for 20 years, and all of a sudden they can see. They thought we were gods. The Himalayas also are another big place. On the way up to Everest, you see this mountain called Ama Dablam, and I did a new route on Ama Dablam up the Northwest Ridge. You can see, and actually you can see Everest from the top. That's Everest. But as I'm traveling to some of these mountains, I'm seeing less glaciers. The glaciers are recessing. And I'm seeing stuff in Greenland and also over in Europe and some of the glaciers there too. So this is what's got me to my point today is really all this climate change that I'm seeing firsthand makes me want to try to do something about it. I did the first ice bike expedition in Antarctica. I was there for 3 weeks. I designed this bike. Time magazine said it was one of the top 30 inventions of 2004. All I did was try to build a bike that I could travel across Antarctica. And I ran about 3 pounds of pressure in the tires, and I hauled a sled. Unfortunately, due to climate change, or there was an atypical storm that came off the Weddell Sea and grounded me for 5 days. I had 150-mile-an-hour winds. I was by myself in a tent. I had to sort of put my feet up against the tent so the tent didn't collapse and keep me in it. So after 5 days, the winds dissipated and I was able to continue the expedition. Originally, I was going to do 330 miles around the Heritage Range in Antarctica. I ended up doing about 220. And I do think it would be a valuable way to cross Antarctica at a faster rate than skiing. I'm a cameraman. Here I am in the island of South Georgia. A gentleman mentioned Ernest Shackleton earlier. I'll go into him a little bit. He's one of my heroes. This is where he was buried, and also he ended up having to do a crossing of that, and I'll tell that story real quick. But my first trip to Antarctica was in 1999, and I went there to climb and ski and snowboard the highest peak in Antarctica. It's the Vincent Massif. It's 16,077 feet. I was blown away. Our plane landed on this ice runway. I get out of the plane. It's blowing about 40 knots. There's sparkles in the air. And then we walk about 100 meters and there's a tent city going on and they're making crepes and strawberries. And I'm like, where am I? So had a great trip with a couple friends and just amazing, amazing time. 6 months later, I actually guided a blind guy and a deaf guy across Antarctica. Actually, a blind guy and his sight guide who was deaf. So that was probably one of the biggest challenges in my life. It was over 748 miles, 62 days wearing the same underwear. So it was, I had all kinds of things that I learned. I ended up breaking my tooth on a piece of chocolate and pulling it out with a needle nose pliers. I ended up getting some frostbite on a toe. It was one thing after another. You end up having to have like a repair kit as well as a medical kit. The repair kit, because you're breaking everything. Everything breaks at minus 50. So nothing works. So you have extensive repairs going on all the time. And here's Miles and John Cook. And after 62 days, 748 miles, we were successful with the journey. And it was just an amazing trip. And just gives you a little bit of, shows you Antarctica. And during this Ross Sea area, that's usually all ice, all sea ice, and that'll stay sea ice all summer long. Also the Roney Ice Shelf, that's Berkner Island, but that's all usually sea ice. A lot of the problem that we're seeing is on this eastern side of the peninsula. There's about 7 glaciers that are calving at an alarming rate. The Larsen B, the Wilkinson, and there's a few other ones that are calving too. Is this cyclical? I'm not sure. There's huge tabular icebergs that are just calving off. I think that actually Antarctica, it's actually growing about a foot a year. There's about a foot of accumulation in the interior of Antarctica that's growing. There is, and I spend a lot of time on the peninsula. I travel over here from Ushuaia and I'll sail down here almost every year and do some skiing on this western side of the peninsula. There is noticeable differences in the temperature. And Dr. Fields mentioned that earlier, how this water temperature is changing and creating more ice melt. I'm seeing differences in the krill populations, which is really the little tiny shrimps that the whole ecosystem is relying on. All the sea life, all the bird life eats that krill. So this is the observations that I'm making with that. But I think in 2000, well, I'll do some skiing down the peninsula. So I run trips here. In 2007, you mentioned Ernest Shackleton. I wanted to actually fly in all the way to the Filchner Ice Shelf. In 1914, Ernest Shackleton tried to do the last great adventure, which he was going to cross the entire continent and then all the way down to the Ross Sea. Instead, he got in the Roney Ice Shelf. The boat got crushed. He stayed on the boat or next to the boat for almost 4 months in the ice. The boat ended up sinking. The very last minute, they made a last-ditch effort to get to this Elephant Island, left 22 men there. He had one of these little tiny rowboats. called the James Caird, and he modified it and put some wood over it. He ended up sailing all the way to the island of South Georgia, 800 miles. He got to the wrong side. He had to cross the island. He went to the wrong whaling station. He had to climb back up and from King Haakon Bay to Stromness, and then he got out of Stromness and went to Fortuna. Or actually, it was the other way around. He got to Fortuna, and then he ended up getting to Stromness. He ended up sailing back to Punta Arenas, Chile, 1,700 miles, writing a letter to the Queen of England that took 6 months. 6 months for the money to get back, because he was like saying, hey, my guys are stuck in Antarctica. And then he ended up getting the money from the Queen, and he went to go sail before winter set out, and he rescued every one of those men. So actually there was that boat that he got the money, he ended up sailing down, and the boat got crushed off of Cape Horn, and he went back and got a Uruguayan Navy boat to be able to go and actually rescue his men. And they lived on penguin and seal for 22 months. Even to this day, I think you should read Endurance by Alfred Lansing. Amazing, amazing story. So what I wanted to do, this is just snowboarding in Antarctica. Just a couple pictures of some of the icebergs. That are the big, huge tabular iceberg. Beautiful icebergs everywhere. Lots of wildlife down there in the peninsula. Leopard seals, humpback whales, gentoo penguins. These penguins haven't lost all the feathers yet. Elephant seals. Big, huge cow. They're sort of interesting animals. They usually have a harem of about 30 girlfriends. Another one will come up on the beach, and then they'll end up fighting till one wins, and then he'll either take over or the one that actually was there. But here's a picture of Shackleton, 1914 through 1916. In 1909, he got within 97 miles of the South Pole and had the ability to say, hey, we're not going to make it. I don't want to lose my men. And he came all the way back. And he was with Robert Falcon Scott, 1911 or 1912. Robert Falcon Scott, January 17th, arrived at the geographic South Pole. Unfortunately, it was a month late. Amundsen, a Norwegian, this is a British guy. Amundsen, a Norwegian, arrived at the geographic South Pole December 14th, 1911. So 1 month later, January 17th, 1912, he arrived, and he ended up perishing on his way back, which is a really sad story. I was there twice this past year. I was there on the anniversaries of Amundsen and also on the anniversary of Scott. But we get into Antarctica with a big, huge plane, a Lucian 76 aircraft, amazing plane, and then we use ski-equipped aircraft to get to our destinations. All the scientists come in. And so I started this journey in 2007, where I went from the coast at Filchner Ice Shelf, and I wanted to recreate the journey that Shackleton intended to do. It had never been done before. I went to a couple glaciologists who had done some research back in the 50s over at the Cambridge Scott Polar Institute, and I talked to them and say, well, what did you see? And there was really not really any mapping or anything. So I ran into the Recovery Glacier, which was about 10 days of just utter chaotic ice mess. I mean, usually when you see a glacier, there's uniformity within the glacier, and you could see the crevassing, and there was no uniformity. The ice was moving in all different directions. This is not a mountain behind. This is like upheaval of ice. You can actually see our tracks as we came across here and then came back around. And then I went and set up the camera, and then I walked back and got in the picture. So it was a little bit of work to be able to do it, but a lot of work. Our sleds weighed 300 pounds. We were doing unsupported trip. You could see that I started it at the coast, which is sea level. And as you get up to the polar plateau is 9,000 feet, 3,000 meters. And you can see how the ground undulates. And I was so focused that I found a 40-pound meteorite that probably was worth $15, $20 million. And you're so focused that you don't want to put a 40-pound meteorite in your sled and take it home. Not that I'd be able to take it with me anyway, or donate it to science. So I just sort of took a picture, took some GPS coordinate, and I have that. But it's just, you're so focused to just keep on going. The last thing you want to do is put anything in your sled. You just want to take things out. So, because every day you want to get lighter and lighter. Total whiteout conditions. You can see I navigate on a lot of different ways, compass, GPS, but on my pole you can see there's a little flag. I use a compass, and I actually able to navigate, because that's one of my biggest fears, is actually having, losing my friends, and it could happen very easily. You get a little distance between it, all of a sudden the wind scours the ski tracks away. It can happen like that, and then you don't know where anybody is. But navigating, This is inside the tent. I've been pioneering technology for over 10 years. I use a little, sort of like a smartphone, iridium satellite phone, and then you can see I have tape on my nose. And it's more preventative. When I sweat, a lot of the times the goggles will freeze to my face, and when I pull the goggles off, I'll rip off skin off my face, so I just put a little tape there to make sure that doesn't happen. Minus 20, quick picture without a shirt. Even myself makes mistakes. Tons and tons of experience, but 2007, I ended up, 2008, I ended up taking my goggles off. They froze solid. I couldn't navigate, I couldn't see anything. I lifted them off. I went without goggles for about 3 hours, and I got snowblind. And for 3 days, I ended up just so painful, just taking painkillers, just trying to get through to get to the South Pole. And finally, we were successful to get to the geographic South Pole. And it took about 5 days for my sight to get back. They have a scepter at the pole. They change every year. There's a new scepter that's placed there. I've seen a bunch of them. I can actually go back to 2000, where my original time that I arrived at the South Pole, and see where that was. And it's moves about 30 feet every year, give or take 5 or 10 feet, sometimes more, sometimes less. And it's not so much the pole is moving, but the whole ice sheet's moving. And there's a big base there. The base is awesome, $443 million base. We're not allowed to go into it. We're considered tourists. So they are doing some great science, ice cores. In the wintertime, or in their winter, which is basically our summer, they got telescopes. They're able to find new 860 million years ago, new galaxies every day. There's no water vapor in the air, and it's super high up, so they're able to see all kinds of really cool stuff. But you can see my tent. I'm camped right next to the base, and I'm fine with that. I weighed 217 pounds at the start of that journey. It was a 47-day trip, and at the end, I weighed 173. So you've heard of the South Beach diet? This is the South Pole diet. And I had to shave my head, and you can see I got a little bit of a patch still going on from my snowblind. Brings me to 2005. I put together an international North Pole trip with 2 other friends of mine, a Norwegian and a Dutch guy. And I didn't want to just go to the North Pole. I wanted to try to make a difference. So I went to the scientists. I said, how can I help? They handed me a 50-pound beacon, and they said, we want you to take 10 of these. And I said, well, I can't even take 1 of these because I don't want to carry 50 pounds with me. So I ended up redesigning the beacon, and they weigh about 7 kilos with carbon fiber tubing, and the instruments are a temperature gauge, barometric pressure gauge, and a GPS, as well as a iridium modem that pings up data to a satellite and down to the Alfred Wenger Institute in Germany. And this is something that I'm really proud of. And I also, the Arctic Buoy program, which is about 16 different nations, is using this beacon that I've designed too now. So you never know what's going to happen. This trip started I flew into Moscow, then flew it to Krasnoyarsk, and then all the way to Siberia to this place called Khatanga, where it was an amazing place. There's Dolgan Indians there. It was sort of this old military town. Underneath, there's all these missile silo things underneath the town. I ran into these Dolgan Indians. These guys are really, really cool. They travel by reindeer, and they're cruising across the tundra. And what's happening is the permafrost is melting, and a lot of these woolly mammoth tusks are starting to appear. And this was one really interesting. I was standing there right after I took this picture. There was a Japanese guy that walked up here and had a hairdryer, and he's blowing this big ice chunk. You can see this. This is underneath the town. There's like these caverns where they probably had missiles going, and then the earth would open up and they'd point it toward probably Alaska, because we're that close. That's the proximity. But he took a hairdryer and he started blow drying some of this. This is a whole mammoth carcass. And he started pulling live hair, or not live, but frozen hair and flesh out of this carcass. And he wanted to artificial inseminate the DNA into a modern day elephant. I'm not all for this kind of thing, because I don't know, why did they become extinct anyway? Is there going to be some plague that's going to come back or whatever? But certainly interesting. They've actually placed 360,000 acres up there as this is 10,000 to 30,000 year old plasticine. era. So this is, they made a Pleistocene park. You've heard of Jurassic Park, but this is a Pleistocene park where they've actually introduced muskox, and they're studying them, and they're going to try to do these elephants, hybrids. But this is inside this thing, all kinds of tusks. You can see how icy the inside. It was super cold in there. 5 hours of daylight. I'd love to go travel with these Dolgan Indians just to check out, see the effects that's happening with the permafrost. They're saying they're having all kinds of trouble because it's getting soggy and they're not able to travel in the summer months when it used to be just all ice and snow to be able to travel across. This is an interesting photo. This was actually February 29th, and that just shows you the North Pole. This is Greenland. This is North America, or Canada actually, Alaska, the Bering Straits, all of Siberia. I was leaving from this point right here called Cape Archichesky. I leave from a lot of my trips from a place here called Spitsbergen, and that's part of Europe really. And, but I was leaving from this point, and that yellow means the purple is all ice. The yellow portion is all open water, and that was the day I was supposed to leave. Here's a close-up picture of this. And it shows, this is Cape Archichesky. So this is February 21st. I left March 1. So I waited about another week, 10 days, because I was leaving from this point here. And this is all open water, which is scary. You can't even leave from this point anymore. We were the last team to leave, and that was in 2005, to actually make an attempt from Russia. And we ended up starting March 1, and we got to about maybe 120 miles. We were trying to move as fast as we could. But for the first 2 days, I couldn't find any place to camp. So what I was doing is we just kept on moving. And it was super dark. The eternal sun doesn't come out until March 22nd. So we had 22 days, and it was every day you'd get probably about another 40 minutes of light. But it started about 40, it'd be like 5 hours of light on March 1st. And what would happen is I couldn't stop because there was no place to pitch the tent, and there was no, I did find a spot to pitch a tent finally after 2 days of traveling, and that we couldn't boil any of the water though that was around because we grabbed snow and ice to be able to make water so we can eat and drink. But there was there was too much salt content in the snow. The ice was too new. Or single-year ice. So I couldn't boil any water. So the only water we had was from the condensation of our breath inside our tent. So we were inside the tent and all iced up inside. I took the pot and the pot lid and just scraped it cautiously to be able to get every single drop of condensation inside the tent. And that's what we only got like about 12 ounces of water each. We traveled about another half a day before we actually found a place to camp, and we pitched camp and we started, drinking for like 4 or 5 hours after that. But the ice is melting for sure. There's big, huge cracks. 4 years ago, I witnessed temperatures 0 degrees Celsius at the North Pole in April. I mean, that's just unheard of. This year in January, it rained in Spitsbergen, 78 degrees north. And that hasn't happened in over 40 years. So just talking to the locals and what's really going on. We use helicopters to get dropped off. We finally got dropped off. This is fairly fresh lead. That's probably a day old. And you could see where the ice was still moving a little bit. And that's why you see this sort of rubble a little bit here. But you could see the crystals forming on the ice. And that's all salt evaporating. And this is the beacon that I was discussing. And our beacons actually are a lot more accurate than the ones that the Arctic Buoy program was previously using. And this is after 52 days, the Norwegian guy, the Dutch guy, and myself. If you look at our jackets are completely soggy. It's a very humid environment. They're supposed to be a big old down puffy jacket. I'm sure you've seen Everest jackets and stuff like that. But because of the humidity, there was no loft left in the jackets after 52 days. And you can see it's super cold out. But this is really what I'm proud of. We pitched three of these beacons. 2 of them are still working today. And it's been, 7 years. They were supposed to only last about 5 years. And they're still delivering data. So we did snow depth measurements for a couple hours after we pitched our tent. Just a typical picture of us crossing, pulling our sleds, some of the rubble terrain, really low. The sun's really low on the horizon. as we're moving across. This is a great picture of just the crystallized salt that's on the top. And that would probably support our weight. Just stopping for a drink. You need to stop and eat and drink. You're burning over 10,000 calories a day. And we're only eating about 5,556. I weigh every single gram. And it's really a science to be able to I got it a little bit wrong on that South Pole trip because I lost so much weight. So you got to really try to beef up before you go on these trips because you know you're going to lose a bunch of weight. And then, of course, this is the hardest journey in the world. There's all kinds of polar bears. Polar bears are something that they look really fuzzy and friendly, but they're actually not. They're one of the few mammals that actually hunt man. And I've had quite a few encounters. I told you a minute ago about me stopping halfway through that day, and I'm in there boiling. My friend Mark, the Dutch guy, was out doing his morning business. I'm boiling because we're so dehydrated and we needed so much fluids that I'm boiling for about 3 or 4 hours, trying to just boil enough ice so we could drink. Peter was taking a rest in the sleeping bag, and I hear Mark outside screaming and yelling. He's going to kill me. He's going to kill me. I get the gun ready. I'm unzip the tent, and from me to you, there's a polar bear, 12 foot tall, standing on its hind legs, and Mark is swinging the shovel to keep the distance from the polar bear with his pants down by his ankles. So I'm getting the gun ready. Peter gets up. I'm not really the gun guy. I hand him the gun. He didn't have any gloves on, and he went and grabbed the metal barrel of the gun and ripped about 10 layers of skin off his hand. So he's screaming, Mark's screaming. I'm just freaking out. We shoot the gun in the air and scare the polar bear away. But we had 19 different polar bear encounters subsequently after that. And what's happening is polar bears are going out on the sea ice looking for seals. So you can't camp around pressure ridges. And what's happening is the ice is melting really quickly, and they're not able to swim all the way back, sometimes hundreds of miles. And so they're drowning. They say there's about 20,000 polar bears left. I'm not sure how accurate that is, but you could see here, there's actually a little beacon. World Wildlife Fund actually spent a couple $1 million on anesthetizing a couple of these females and males, and they track them. So this was actually one that actually in the wild, but there's a tracking device on this one. And these cubs are probably 2 months old, I would think. And the mom, they're really interesting animals. They can smell a seal from 8 miles away. They can not only smell a seal, but the mother will make a cave every year, and she'll keep her cubs for 2 to 3 years. The male will actually just do a walking slumber. He'll walk for 2.5 months in a sleepwalk kind of phase. And then they're really hungry, and then we just happen to be in their ecosystem. But they're very cute. I mean, super cute. But a lot of rubble terrain, not a lot of, some days the sun's out, sometimes it's not. I had ice, hold my eyelids shut, frozen shut. We're going up over pressure ridges. I'm trying to find the most efficient way to go.
Can you shoot a polar bear?
You have to do some paperwork, but I'm sure if one was charging me and I had no other nothing else to do.
I was wondering if it was illegal.
You're not supposed to.
Yeah, I didn't think so. Okay.
So, but you could see some of the rubble terrain that we're trying to cross, some of these big, huge pressure ridges. This is just a bunch of rubble terrain. What I'm seeing happening going there's not a lot of multi-year ice at the pole itself anymore. A lot of this multi-year ice is being pushed down to the Baffin Straits in Canada and Baffin and northern Canada and Greenland. And I'm seeing a lot of rubble terrain like this there. So what's happening, this is multi-year ice because you can see how thick it is. That's probably anywhere from 7 to 14 years old. I'm seeing a lot of single-year ice up on the pole itself and in the main part of the Arctic. And that's sort of scary to me because it's not real thick, and it's actually easier for me to get to the pole the last couple years because of not a lot of pressure ridges. And a lot of more open water. And we're using sleds to be able to cross some of these leads. I designed the sleds. I designed the harness, a lot of the gear I designed. I got my own boot model, and we're hopscotching from lily pad to lily pad to be able to get there. Sometimes we jump. Sometimes we have to swim. A lot of the time we'll just get to an open water lead, and it won't even be a discussion with your teammates. You just throw on the dry suit and you start swimming. I'm afraid of the polar bear for sure, so I make sure that one of them has a gun ready. You know, because basically you're in this ice, rubble, this like brash ice, and you're not very mobile. And those polar bears, they can run 40 miles an hour and swim real well. So you want to make sure that you're not, we just jump in and swim across. It's not a big deal. The water is actually 32 degrees. The water's warmer than the air, so you got a down jacket. But you work as a team. You know, you help each other out. And sometimes I even use kayaks. You know, I've actually dragged a kayak with me, and you can see I use a shovel as a paddle just to get across. And a typical camp. And been to the pole. I think I've been to the North Pole 13 times, and I've been to the South Pole 10 times. I think that's probably skied to both poles more than anybody on the planet. And then, you know, we get picked up by a helicopter and go back to an ice station and then take a jet back to Spitsbergen. But that's really all the slides I wanted to share with you. And I hope you guys enjoyed the lecture. And I can answer some questions. And hopefully you guys have some questions. And if I didn't answer any of your questions that were forwarded to me, I'm happy to answer some questions. Questions? Go ahead.
How do you decide what gear you need to take?
That's a great question. The question was, how do I decide what gear to take? Well, a lot of the time I make mistakes too, you know, and one time I designed this stove that was basically a 5-gallon drum, and it was metal, and I cut little holes out of the bottom of it, and I was able to put the stove inside, and it was super efficient, and then the pot fit down inside, so it was like this double-walled pot, which is a great idea. Nansen had it 100 years ago, and they don't even make them now anymore, and I don't know why, because it's super efficient. But what was happening is we're in the tent, and there was no ambient heat coming off that thing, and we were freezing inside the tent. So I was like, get rid of this thing. We need the heat from the stove a little bit when we're in the vestibule. So I think sometimes as you go through testing and stuff like that, you find some things that work and some that don't. It's still an evolution. It's not like I can go to REI or the local sporting goods store and pick up a lot of the gear. I have my own boot model design. I design my sleds. I design the harnesses. I work with a lot of companies to design gear, even clothing. You know, for body mapping, and it's an aerobic activity that we're doing. We're actually pretty much, it's about controlling your perspiration. If you sweat too much, it's all over because you'll just freeze. All the ice will be inside your jacket, and you'll, you know, basically freeze to death. So it's about, I don't even wear that much clothing. I'll wear like a light Gore-Tex jacket and a shirt like this, and that's it, in -40, because we're constantly moving. And just understanding it's not a race either, it's a huge marathon, so we're just traveling quite slow and you know, just trying to get over, and it's a lot of energy you're burning too. Like I said, 10,000 calories. Did I answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
How did you get into this, like, funding and all of that kind of thing?
I don't know. I think it was an evolution. I think I wanted to go climb and ski Antarctica, and I got asked to do this polar thing, and I liked the challenge, and that evolved. The polar thing evolved into more education stuff, like I'm doing now, and more science work, because I felt I needed to. I have a filmmaking background. I wanted to have a beginning, a middle, and an end, and a purpose while I'm going. I think I make all my clients raise money for charity, and I think we've raised, $7 million for certain charities, and that makes me feel good, you know, for me to be able to go about and trying to understand that and try to do good, raise money for kids and other charities, Livestrong or cancer or whatever, you know, it gives me a meaning to be able to do it. I have a purpose and feel good about getting us to the pole, because there's a huge carbon footprint for that. You know, with all the planes and big, huge Aleutian aircraft going to Antarctica and helicopters and all that kind of stuff. So I think it's been an evolution, and I'll continue to push the limits of human endurance as I can. And a week ago, I was down in Cuba trying to stand up paddleboard from Cuba to Key West. And, you know, I ran into, they got the weather completely wrong. One of the boat support that was helping me out ended up, one of the engines broke down, and they were calling for 1 to 2 knots, or I'm sorry, they're calling for 8 to 10 knot winds and swells 1 to 2 feet. And they ended up being 4 to 6 foot and 15 knot winds. So, you know, they got it completely wrong. And I'll go back and try it again probably in July, but that was to raise money for my charity. So. Go.
What's your current or next project? Like, what do you?
I have an Amazon project in February. I'll also do a trip to Morocco to go skiing, taking some clients to Morocco. I have a Greenland project in March where I'll go and take some skiers off a boat there. And most of my stuff is man climbing where you're not using lifts or helicopters or snowmobiles. It's all sort of self-propelled human to get you there. And then I have a couple trips to Spitsbergen, which is one of my favorite places, and I think I'd like to continue working there. Dr. Fields and I want to possibly deploy some of this 911 project up there and try to find a really sensible place to be able to ascertain data from some of the fjords in Spitsbergen or Svalbard. Svalbard is the whole archipelago. The island that we fly into is Spitsbergen, and it's amazing. It's above the Arctic. It's 78 degrees north. You can go all the way up to 80 degrees north. So it's as far north as you possibly can get there simply going through Europe. Mark?
Assuming like you're trying to minimize a lot of the risk on these trips, but what's the biggest risk you've ever taken? Why'd you take it?
I think for me, I know my parameters, and I think when I bring people, I can try to get them up to speed by pictures and video, and that gives them a visual, but they also need to train physically and be ready. And I know that I can do it because I have prior experience. And I think my biggest fear is I need to train super hard and be ready for it, but they don't know their parameters. And last year I took a guy with a spinal cord injury to the South Pole. And so I had to come up with all these new things. He can't feel his feet. So I had to design thermocouplers that I taped to his toes and then run cables all the way up his leg and then have like a little temperature gauge in his stomach, and I had to look at it every hour to make sure that he wasn't going to freeze his toes off. So I think every new project has new challenges, and I think that's part of it for me, you know, and I want to make sure that everybody's safe. You know, I'm the guide, I'm the person out there pushing these people and want to make sure that they're successful, and that would be awful if, you know, it's not about their disability, it's about their ability, and if something happened to them, that would be really bad on my point. So, you know, to try to overcome that and really be sensible about it and try to think about everything. I mean, I think that's really, really important, and I think yeah, I'll continue to do it, you know. Go ahead.
So during any of your expeditions, have you ever felt like, why am I doing this to myself? Like, how do you keep up the motivation? Like, it's easy, when you face a lot of difficulties, it's easy to give up, right? So how do you keep up the motivation during such times?
I think I'm a pretty motivated individual, and I know that there's a collecting science, or I'm raising money for charity, and that motivates me. You know, I know that there's going to be good from it. I'm not just going to go to the pole and beat my chest or get to the summit of something. I know that there's good going to come from it, and it gives me purpose in why I do it. And I think that's really the key, to be honest with you. And you know, people say, what's the most dangerous trip you've ever been on? You know, and I could probably say honestly, it was probably the drive down here on the 101. You know, so you know, it's like everything has their point, you know, so, you know, and I'm afraid not to live. I think, you know, you ascertain a lot of knowledge, and when you go to these extreme environments and the gear is all there, and you try to double check everything, and I certainly don't have a death wish. You know, I'm out there, you know, in really inhospitable places, and I'm humbled by it, and I respect it. And I think you need to have that attitude when you go to these places.
Have you ever run out of food?
Have I what?
Have you run out of food?
How about food? I have a couple times. I calculated wrong, and I've had to ration toward the end. But yeah, I mean, I try not to make that mistake very often. I mean, but you know, and it's down south, it's an equation. You know, 10 days into the trip, even though it's a 60-day trip, you have this much food, this much fuel, and you need to travel this much distance each day. And if you don't make that distance, the equation changes. Simple. North Pole's different. I mean, you could ski 20 miles and get pushed back 10, you know, just in your tent at night. So that's an anomaly. I mean, you can't really calculate for that one. But South Pole, you know, you're moving. You know, every day it's a very civilized, structured way of life. Every day you get up at 6 a.m., and get that stove going, you eat and drink, and then you pack up your stuff and you have to start moving. And 14 hours later, you set up the tent, and hopefully you made your distance. and you do it again. It's a very routine, almost to the point where you don't want it to end, in a very strange way. I mean, once you achieve your goal, you become so focused and so regimented that it's like, oh my gosh, it's over. I want to get up and ski tomorrow, kind of thing. So, go ahead.
How do you train?
I pull tires. I put a tire behind me and I carry it to the top of squaw. Even sometimes when the days are shorter now, I'll do it with a headlamp on, 11 o'clock at night. Run, ski. In the wintertime, I ski about 200 days a year. So I do a lot of backcountry skiing. I skin up, 7,000 or 8,000 feet before 9 a.m. and then go home.
Is it important to more build your muscles or cardio or just everything?
That's a great question. I think it's important to simulate the same activity that you're going to do. So for me, it would be pulling that tire to simulate me pulling a sled. I don't really go to a gym or anything. I do outside stuff. I climb, I ski, I run, I do some push-ups, and I got a pull-up bar in my house, and I do all that to try to stay fit. But I think mentally and physically you have to be ready for these things, and I train super hard, because if something happened to my client or for my friends, I know that I could pull my sled, his sled, and possibly him if I needed to. So I think going into it, I wouldn't want to be on day 2 and say, man, I should have trained more. I will never ever do that. So I think simulating the same activity. I've been paddling a lot all summer. I went around Lake Tahoe, and that's 77 miles in 16 hours and 33 minutes. I think I paddled almost 6 hours a day for probably 3 months. So just to get ready for Cuba, so I was pretty ready for that. And so, I think you put the time in and you can do it. And then the rest of it's just mental.
Have you ever had to pull a client out?
I have had to pull a client's sled, and then they skied. Wow. So, and that's a little bit of maybe, not communicating or them not feeling right. Sometimes when you're on the Arctic Ocean, I've seen this happen a couple times where people get swollen in really cold temperatures. And I think that was the case with this particular person. It might be a thyroid thing or something like that, but I've seen it a couple times with clients, and that's you can't plan on that. Sometimes people react differently to cold temperatures. Your body is super resilient. It takes me 2 or 3 days to adjust to really cold temperatures. Same thing, the heat, it takes me 2 or 3 days to adjust to heat too. It's amazing how resilient your body is. Go ahead.
I think there's a lot of publicity about the shrinking extent of ice in the Arctic. Seems like not so much publicity or whatever about the Antarctic area. You mentioned, I guess, in the Weddell Sea that there's a lot of the shelf moving and collapsing, but the interior is building up.
That's correct.
What's the kind of net situation in Antarctica?
I think I touched on it briefly, and I'll go into a little bit more, but the Antarctic is growing. I think there's water temperatures that are changing down south that's from climate change. I think the really alarming thing is up north and the Arctic Ocean. And I think we're going to see grave differences and changes in the eastern United States and Western Europe because of where it's located. I think those are the temperatures. And even Katrina, I mean, it's something that intensified from the warming water, I think what happens with this polar ice melt, it's really so important for our Gulf Stream. And what she's teaching about the albedo and the reflectivity and these thermohaline circulation of actually this polar ice melt. And what happens, and I know that you're learning all this, but this salt water that's melting and dives deep and heads toward the equator, and the warm equatorial water is heading toward the poles, and every season that melts. And so you change that melt pattern a little bit, you're going to change the Gulf Stream, and you change weather patterns and so on and so forth. And that is just a layman's, it's so much more complex than that, and I'm just sort of talking like I talk to kindergartners. So I apologize, but it's a lot more complex than that, but that's a basic introduction to it. And I know you guys are learning a lot about that now.
Back to supplies. So do you carry any water with you, or do you melt?
I
You
live in
melt
a
that
freezer.
all on the way?
You just fuel and a stove. That's my life support. If something happened to the stove, I can fix it. If I lose fuel, then it's all over.
So you take butane?
No, it's white gas.
White gas?
I have it in, I pad up these 5-gallon things and I put in my sled, or I have metal fuel bottles, all white gas. I use MSR stove, XGKEXs, and they're good on Everest.
To melt all
Absolutely.
how much do you haul?
How much fuel?
Right.
It depends on how many days.
Say like 2 weeks.
2 weeks, I'll haul, it's usually about 400 milliliters per person per day. So depending on how many clients I have or how many people, I do the calculation in, 10 gallons maybe for 2 people for 2 weeks. Maybe a little less, 8. So when it's colder and it's freezing, it takes more fuel to burn. Right. And also at altitude, at 9,000 feet, when you're at the South Pole, it takes more fuel to burn. So you got to calculate all those type of things, and you always go heavy. Fuel is the main thing that you need. You can live. I can ration food and stuff like that, but if I don't have water, I'm gonna die. Right. So fuel is like one of the things that you pack in there, and you want to have a bunch of.
Like pack heavy, like how much over what you the bare minimum do you pack?
I think it's taken me a decade to really fine tune that, and I've gotten pretty good at it. I mean, I lay everything out and weigh every gram, all my food. You ever see those camping packages that freeze-dried food in? I decant those. I actually work with a company in Boulder, Colorado, and I add more protein, meats and stuff like that, and I put it in a plastic bag and I cut it off, and I actually write down the caloric intake and what it is, and the type of foods that are coming out are like, they have all kinds of great stuff. Turkey tetrazzini and kung pao chicken, and so that's something that I really look forward to at the end of the day. It's one of the few things that you do. You want to make sure that you have really good food and that you're getting enough caloric intake. And it's super important. I mean, during the day, you're eating nuts and freeze-dried fruit and beef jerky and, hopefully chocolates that aren't too big and, and a lot of nuts and that kind of thing. So during the day, and then a soup, maybe a soup or maybe some electrolyte during the day. But in breakfast is usually muesli or a granola or a oatmeal in the morning with olive oil on it or a stick of butter. And, it's like a high-fat diet. You want to be able to eat a lot of fat. Because you're burning calories, and on the longevity part of the thing, it'll definitely take its toll. So, I designed the diet to try to eat close to 6,000 calories a day, and the foods all are in that little plastic, and then I can actually burn that plastic, and my trash is that big, and I could put 60 days in a sandwich bag, and I'm not hauling. If you took those metal, aluminum packages, and you had 60 days of those, I mean, that's probably 2 kilos of just excess weight that I didn't need to carry. So I think you think about it and you try to minimize it as much as possible. I mean, there's things that you have to bring, and there is luxury items like a book or iPad, Down south, I can use a solar panel to recharge batteries. Up north, the sun's too low. There's no ambient, and it's actually fairly warm inside the tent. The tent will warm up because of where the sun sits. But up north, it's still brutally cold, because it's still so low on the horizon. It's even very difficult to get a solar charge. So I carry a brick of battery just in case my sat phone gets left on and I'm able to recharge it. Emergency.
You've taken kids on trips sometimes. What's that like? Who have you taken?
I've taken an 8-year-old down to the Antarctic Peninsula, and I think it's great. I've taken a 10-year-old to the Amazon. I think what I do is I get the student involved in a journalism in a box where they write the script to be able to talk to students when I do these high-speed feeds. So I'm able to have a BGAN and a MacBook Pro with a camera on it that can go wireless and actually connect with students in the classroom. We could do it right in here. And I could be there, and they not only are in charge of doing the dispatch to a school each day, but they have to edit a video, They have to send pictures and do a blog each day. So students can learn from students. So it's really actually quite impactful. And sometimes I take high school kids. I had 2 high school kids on my last trip, and they were sort of the journalism people. And we have myself, and we have marine biologists and ornithologists and guides and stuff like that that are helping with, if there's questions that someone says, oh, that penguin that's pecking at your boot, how old is that? And the kids might not know, but you can say, oh, well, that penguin is probably 6 weeks old. It's going to take another 2 weeks for it to lose all its feathers and then go hunt for itself. So, you want to be able to articulate the right information to the students as well. So that's a big part of it. I mean, I like bringing kids with me. I think kids just don't want to open up a textbook and learn about a penguin, but if they can see one live and be able to ask questions, I think it engages them in wanting to learn.
How much does it cost to go?
It depends. The Peninsula ski sail trips are 13 days, 12 nights, and they run about $8,000 US, and then you still have to get down to Ushuaia. The Amazon trip is about, I think, $4,000, and that's for 12 days. And we do some stand-up paddling, and I got lights, LED lights, so we go out paddling at night, and you can see all the fish. Because it's the Rio Negro. It's not it doesn't have the brackish brown water. You can really see clear. There's all kinds of peacock bass. We fish. We live sustainably. We trade with indigenous tribes. We stop at indigenous tribes and interact with them. It's really a pretty cool trip. And I've done 4 of those, and it's a lot of fun. And I'm going to try to do a bunch of rainforests around the world. And my educational part is really to talk about deforestation and biodiversity and talk about some of the issues that are going on, because the river is everything. Everybody travels by the rivers. And, it's a physical thing to try to paddle all the way down, but really it's more about learning. And I love learning about wildlife and culture and all those type of things. So I continue to go different places so I can learn too.
I was going to ask about wildlife. You mentioned the polar bears being in trouble. What else do you see as you travel around the world that's having pressure on it especially?
Well, the Amazon is a perfect example. 20% of the Amazon rainforest has been deforested, and there's so many medicinal purposes with the rainforest and animals that people don't even know about. Every time I go down there, I have scientists on board my 24-passenger boat that are looking for new species. And then, it's like, oh, I've never seen this one before. I'll bet this is a new species. Let's call it, the Jones fish, because it's Dr. Jones that just found it. So, I mean, there's a lot of that going on. I think the Amazon is just a remarkable place to learn, and it's really inspiring to me. And I want to go to more rainforests around the world, and Cambodia, Laos, and do more paddleboard trips and learn more about some of these places. So, and I am seeing a lot of, I'm seeing penguins usually go back to the same rookery every year. And I have seen a few rookeries that actually they've dissipated and they've gone elsewhere, or they're just not there. And that's rare. And also I'm seeing, with the less krill populations, they're postponing their trip down to Antarctica and coming later. It depends on the snow year too. If there's a lot of snow on land, they can't build nests. So I'm seeing some of that going on. So that really depends. If it is a low snow year, then they're able to start earlier, and so that's being affected. But I am seeing a lot of krill. The krill populations are a lot less, and that's reflective on the wildlife. And it's survival of the fittest. If there's not enough food, then something's got to go. So.
I'm going to ask another one then.
Okay.
Are you noticing much soot problems as you're going? I would imagine snow might be getting darker. And
I haven't noticed too much of that. I have had some friends in Alaska and northern Canada that had some stuff from China with some of the weather and bringing some of the smog and stuff like that all the way over to the upper Canada and also Alaska. But to be honest with you, I haven't physically noticed any of that. It's pretty pristine, and it snows. When I'm up there for a couple weeks. In April, the season's super short. It's only about 21 days, and I'm on the ice probably 18 or 19 of those days. So I'm not seeing much there. I'm seeing a lot of seaweed and stuff in some of the ice, but that's a natural phenomenon. That's not, I mean, most of the ice is, has been, it's a greenish type of algae that's in the ice, and that's normal, but I haven't seen any darkened soot patterns or anything. I will in Spitsbergen, because they actually burn coal there. And it's hydroelectric coal, and there's soot everywhere on all the snow. But that's a whole different thing. That's not from anywhere, that's from the local town.
Do you think your profession is like a realistic one for someone your age when you first started?
I think it's like an evolution. I mean, this isn't what I said I was going to do 10 years ago. I think it evolved, and I mean, 12 years ago, if you ever said I'd be to Antarctica 24 times, I'd probably say no way, And I think when you step out and do something and you're passionate about it, and hopefully I'll be able to go this year again, and I don't take it for granted. I love going back and I love doing the science work, and hopefully I'll be able to go back every year as long as I can. Because it's an amazing place and I'm blown away by it. So I hope to be able to continue to travel and go to these places and hopefully learn more. But who knows, it might be 3 years from now, we won't be able to ski to the North Pole. And then I'll have to come up with ways to get there like kayak. So, and that's why I bring some of these, kayaks or floating sleds and to be able to get there. I've had to use them almost every year or swim. What happens if you got a client that paid a bunch of money to get to the North Pole, and all of a sudden there's a big lake and the North Pole's way there. Well, how are we going to get there? You got to swim there with your GPS, try to find it. It's 3,000 feet of water below me, There it's usually only, a foot or a couple feet of ice, maybe just a couple inches. So, and the Russians actually placed a flag down there, Chelengarov that was in the Duma, and they claimed it because there's a strip of land that goes all the way into Russia, so they think that that's part of their land. They claim the North Pole, 3,000 feet down, in a super sub. So
you hear a lot about the increase in the number of climbers, like in the Himalayas and Mount Everest. Do you see that same phenomenon at the poles and any impact?
To be honest with you, it's such a new thing. There's probably been less than 500 people that ever ski to the pole. There's been over 5,000 that have been on Everest. Am I taking advantage of that, taking people and using it as a tourist thing? Absolutely. I'm one of 9 international polar guide association, which is making sure that we travel safely in these environments. And that just started like 6 months ago. And we all have the right criteria and skill and use the right gear to be able to take people safely. And that's just starting, sort of like how they're in the mountains, they have a guide system. UIAGM or AMGA is the American Guide Association. So now we're trying to grasp that so we can actually take people there and visit there safely. So yes, am I part of the problem, taking people there? I mean, I want people to be ambassadors for Antarctica and for the Arctic Ocean, so we can change it and keep it pristine and clean, and for many years to come. I don't think it's going to go away in our lifetime, but our kids and our kids' kids, they might have more of an issue with it, and I don't know. It's look at the graph, 20% already, and 3 years from now, I might not be able to ski to the pole, so.
Of your carbon footprint and taking, like packing everything out that you take in and all of that. I mean, do you see that with other guides?
I think everybody's on the same page. All my clients are on the same, everybody here, I'm sure is. I mean, we all recycle, we all trying to travel and on bikes and, and do the right thing. I don't know, I don't even have any friends that, you go to foreign countries and they're throwing stuff out the window. That just wouldn't happen here, and probably still does. I mean, if you walk on the side of the road, there's all kinds of stuff, but it's probably out of somebody's pickup truck that blown out or whatever. But I think everybody is conscious about it, and we all want to preserve and protect this planet in which we live, and I think that's through education. So
we've only got a minute or so. What would be your message to these guys? What can they do for this planet?
I think we touched on that right now, is continue to protect this planet in which we live. It's an amazing place, and it's not getting any better, and I think we all need to do something about it. And anything that we do, I think, is helpful. And can we reverse our carbon footprint? Absolutely. Can we change this? You know, can we stop the ice melt from the Arctic, which I think is an early warning sign? I think we can try, you know, and I think you're trying to do some great things to maintain that and be able to do that. It's accelerating at an alarming rate. In some places like Greenland, I mean, there's chunks of ice that are just being, you know, miles and miles of ice just gone overnight because of some of these ice melts in the moulins and stuff like that. I mean, it's crazy. And what I'm seeing in just the short period of time that I've been doing it, I've only been doing it for 11 years up there. So I'm seeing big differences. So, you know, it's just continue to collect data and see if we can find a solution is really the idea. And I think you're doing the right things for it.
Well, thank you so much for being here.
You didn't learn much about engineering, but hopefully you learned a little bit about the Arctic and the Antarctic. And thank you guys very much for having me. And thank you. And thanks for coming, Satish and the students, and Marco, and for coming for lunch, and Mike and Chelsea for coming too.